everyone. I'm Teresa Eyring, Executive Director and CEO of TCG, and I use she, hers pronouns. And that music was awesome. I'm feeling pretty joyful after grooving to that music. I am currently on the unceded lands of the Munsee Lenape and Wappinger peoples. And for a brief visual description, I'm wearing an army green fitted jacket, purple glasses, and sitting in front of the Fall Forum backdrop, which includes a tall, cheerful looking plant and the words, "A just and thriving theater ecology," which is our new mission and what we are all working towards together as a community.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Adrian Badu, the Deputy Director and COO of TCG, and I use he, him pronouns. I am currently zooming in from the land of Lenape, Hokan. And to give you a short visual description, I am of Indian descent. I have black hair, brown eyes, and I'm wearing a baby pink button-down short sleeve shirt with little Boston Terriers on it. And there's a reason for that. If you joined us a couple hours ago, I just want to give big shout outs to Aaron and Jacob for their amazing plenary, Center in Joy. And there was a question that the amazing facilitators sort of poised in that room is, what is joy? And for me, joy is spending time with my little smooshy face Boston Terrier named Jack. So I wanted to honor that joy and bring that joy into community and wear my button down with little Boston Terriers on it. So there it is.
I love Jack. Before we move into our community session, we wanted to name a member of our community who needs our support right now. William S. Yellowrobe Jr., the great Assiniboine and African-American playwright, is in an ICU after a heart attack and is currently breathing with the assistance of a ventilator. Bill's impact on our theater ecology cannot be overstated. As an actor, author, director, educator, playwright, and poet, and as a beloved mentor and friend, Bill and his wife need immediate support. And so if you can give it this time in any amount, please do. There's a link to their GoFundMe campaign in the chat.
Thank you, Teresa. And thank you all for supporting William. The importance of supporting freelancers in our field, the individual artists and workers in education, production, and administrative roles, has only grown amid the pandemic. That's why TCG is proud to work in partnership with the front office to launch the Freelancers Relief Fund for theater designers. Theater designers can apply through two categories: one, critical needs, and two, financial hardship. And we'll have more to share on this program shortly. Big thanks go out to our own Emilia Cachapero and Wendy Goldberg for their leadership of this program.
While the Freelancers Relief Fund focuses on the most vulnerable in our theater ecology, we continue our federal arts advocacy for relief and recovery funds for all theaters and theater makers. In the coming days and weeks, Congress will be working on finalizing an FY21 federal budget and enacting a COVID-19 relief package. It is extremely important for theater advocates to continue to contact your elected officials and communicate the importance of relief to our sector. You can find a link to an arts advocacy message in the chat.
Now it's time to welcome the wonderful co-facilitation team of our next plenary, Center and Community. Please join me in welcoming Jonathan McCrory and Alexandra Meda to our virtual stage.
Hello. Oh.
That's all good. Hello, hello. This is exciting, right, Jonathan?
Yes, yes, we are deeply excited. We were actually up late last night being like, what else are we gonna add to this? What else are we gonna do?
And then, we also, keeping all of that in mind, we're also really excited about bringing in some relaxed energy into this space. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but let me just introduce myself. Hello, my name is Alex Meda. I use the pronoun she, her, hers. I have my feet here planted on Tongva land, East Los Angeles, Boyle Heights. And I just got to say, I have been born into a conversation that is already happening. This land is steeped in violence. It is also steeped in love and transformation and joy. For the visual, I am a white or light-skinned Latina, plus size, unapologetically, wearing some computer glasses, because I spend 14 hours a day on the computer and I gotta protect these ojitos, okay? And that's my description today. Oh, one more thing I wanted to say. I just recently bought this frame here. It has nothing in it yet, but it is gonna hold Miss Diane Rodriguez's photo. So she can be here with me in all my meetings. I just wanted to name that before I pass it to you, Jonathan.
Ashe, ashe, ashe. Hi, my name is Jonathan McCrory. For a description, I'm on the land of the Lenape people. I am in Harlem, New York. I am an African-American man inside of brownstone, wearing a scarf. If anyone knows me, I love scarves. I love to drape myself. Having on eyeglasses as well, because eye strain is real in the digital world. And also having a winged earring. So one of my ears are actually pierced. It's actually my right ear. And this conversation, just to dive in, I think we're ready for it. This conversation is really centered around community. I think coming from joy, coming from the space of joy and what joy has as a radical space of grounding oneself, now we get to have a conversation around community, how community can help to be built from joy, how community can be built as a space for healing, but also how community holds a space of grief. Especially in the midst of COVID-19 and the impact of COVID-19. Alex and I hope that in the midst of our time together, that we don't run away from this notion of grief, and we center in the notion of intimacy, and we activate this notion of love and joy as a source and a repository source that I think, for me in particular, as a person of African descent, I understand and I know from my ancestral lineage how joy is the cup that does runneth over, the thing that has fortified for someone like me to show up against the adversity of everything that my ancestors have faced, collective and singularly. Alex, do you want to do any more framing before we kind of dive in?
Yeah, just real quickly. I love everything that you're bringing into the room. I want to say I also got to see at least a little bit of the joy session, and it was just so motivating and so inspiring. And I want to carry all of that energy, right, into this space with us. One of the things that Jonathan and I talked about is the need for more and consistent peer exchange, right? Mm-hmm. So although Jonathan and I are super steeped in this work of community, we know that all the genius that is living in this room is ready to be shared, okay? So we want to enter the space with that. Jonathan, when we first started talking about this, brought up this quote from, all of our favorite, Ms. Adrienne Marie Brown. So we're gonna share an image of that quote on the screen while Jonathan reads it to us. Does that sound good, Jonathan, to move on to that?
That sounds so awesome.
Okay, so as we get ready to move into that process, if you have a piece of paper and pen, please grab that. If you wanna do it digitally, that's fine, but we really encourage you, the practice of writing your response to this quote is helpful, just putting that pen to paper. So I'm gonna share my screen. All right, Jonathan, whenever you are ready.
Here we go, from Adrienne Marie Brown's Emergent Strategy. P.S. I'll wait until it actually populates.
Technical challenges. How about now?
There we go. So here we go. P.S. If there happens to be a multitude of griefs upon you, individual or collective, fast or slow, or small or large, and equal parts of these considerations, at equal parts of these considerations, that the broken heart can cover more territory, that perhaps love can only be as large as grief demands, that grief is the growing up of the heart that burst boundaries like an old skin or fashioned life, that grief is gratitude, that water seeks scale, that even your tears seek the recognition of community, that the heart is a front line, and the fight is to feel in a world of distraction, that death might be the only freedom, that grief is a worthwhile use of your time, that your body will feel only as much as it is able to, that the ones that you are grieving may be grieving you, that the sacred comes from the limitations, that you are excellent at loving.
I just think I have to repeat that last line for us, friends, that you are excellent at loving. So if you need to screenshot this, please do, because in our next activity, you are going to be using this quote, all right? Oh, I probably stopped my share too fast. It's okay. All right, so here's the plan, my friends. We want to see you in the chat sharing some of that response. Take a moment, keep reflecting. And as you start to share with us some of your thoughts and reactions to that, we are also going to get ready. Yeah, let's pop that into the chat. Absolutely. Can we get some tech support for that? I know it's in our document. So as we continue to consider that inspirational quote, we want to hear how you're responding to it. How are your communities dealing with this grief, right? We don't want to all the way run to the end of healing and skip the process, right? So we are going to ask everybody we're going to go into quick breakouts, right, Jonathan?
Yeah. We're gonna go, yes, we are going to go into quick breakouts, 10-minute breakout rooms. Yeah, and we're going to ask you to introduce yourselves, grapple with this quote. And the other thing we're going to ask you to do, and I'm going to share my screen again, okay? And if some TCG folks can pop the link into the chat, we are going to ask you in your breakout room to look at a screen like this. This is Padlet, all right? You're going to press that plus sign. You're going to say whatever you want to say. Then you could title it or just put it, and that's it. You hit enter, you're done. It posts, okay? This is how we are going to gather both your thoughts and your responses, as well as what are the full breakout peer share spaces that you would like to engage in later on in this plenary. Let me know if that's making sense, because that's a lot of information I just gave you. Jonathan, if you want to clarify anything, please do. Yeah, I mean, I think—
one more time.
Go ahead.
Yeah, could you just say the thing about the Padlet one more time?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so we have this Padlet where you can hit that plus sign once you click on that link, all right? And you are gonna add in any thoughts or responses you would like that come up from your group conversation in response to this quote. And you're also gonna tell us what kind of peer exchange rooms would you like to be made available for once we come back, do a little grounding in our foundations of community. And you're gonna tell us what kind of room do you wanna go into next? And we're gonna populate that. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So I think without further ado, let's do the small breakouts right now. Let's activate that and everyone go in their breakout rooms. And then from there, we'll keep on building. Everyone's starting to come back. We're hoping that you've had the opportunity to connect with some people that you might never have connected with before, or deepen a connection with people that you already knew. We're hoping that this time that we have provided for this first 10 minutes really have allowed for you to kind of center in some elements of this quote that we just shared. And we're just allowing for everyone to get back into the room, and then we're gonna go the next step inside of this session.
Thank you all to those who contributed to this Padlet. I'm loving this collection of reflections. Thank you.
Josh, you want to let us know when it feels like we're all here. We'll keep the torch going.
I think you're good.
Great.
I think everyone's back.
Great. I just want to center in on something that Alex had brought up, which was that you are excellent at loving. And when we start talking about community, from my vantage point, I think Alex will agree with me that community has a source from a space of love. If we want to generate strong community, bound community that actually builds and actually bellows and actually grows from a space of authenticity and healing, love has to be at the center of it. And I think that if we can honor the spaces of how we love, how excellent we are inside that love, and how grief is a mechanism of us understanding that we are a vessel to generate love, long for love, and to be the source of it. And we potentially can flip on the other side the mechanism of what COVID-19 and the incidents of COVID-19 have actually generated. So I just wanted to name that as a transparent tool of what we're trying to uplift in this moment, especially in a moment dealing with and talking about community. However, we want to create a space for us to talk to each other. So if folks don't mind just uplifting in this moment, things that you took from the quote, things that your small session provided, and then we'll go a little bit deeper and talk about two other things before we go into larger breakout sessions. I mean, peer-to-peer sharings and the larger questions that we want to actually explore during our time together.
So you can come on mic, you can put it in the chat, we can create a stack, however you need to engage to lift up some of that.
Martin and I didn't really talk so much about the quote because we were a tiny bit confused about what our purpose was. So next time we go into a breakout room, that would be great to just understand that a little bit more. But one thing that the quote did for me is I started thinking about our president-elect Joe Biden and how he is a broken-hearted man, and thinking about how our country is brokenhearted. And we're in the middle of loss in so many different areas. And maybe only a broken-hearted man could help heal a broken-hearted country.
Thank you. Other points?
I'll go. Hi. In our little group, we kind of sat quietly and really digested the statement or the quote. And it was helpful to just kind of isolate what touched you. And then we had like a moment to really talk about it. And in a smaller sort of space as strangers, I'm picking up what you guys are laying down about community and how you push us all into these spaces. So that was cool. And it was nice meeting all of you.
I just want to uplift something that you said that I think is quite powerful and necessary. And I also want to say thank you for the feedback around how you got into your room and you didn't necessarily know 100% what to do, taking it in and know that we are going to pivot. That the notion of silence, how silence integrates this notion of allowing for you to start from a different space, an equalized space potentially. I always consider silence as the great disruptor. We sometimes run away from silence, but it's the great disruptor. It's the notion that allows for you not to go from your regularly scheduled program, but for you to allow for something else to show up in the room, which I think is necessary to build authentic community. Right? We want to start building authentic community. I can't come from a program space. I have to allow for your energy to meet my energy and for us to figure out what kind of diamond do we want to generate together. And that might come through friction. If we think about how diamonds are so valued in our society, diamonds are generated through friction. So then how do we allow for silence to come into some of our scheduled ideas of what should happen and allow for the discomfort of what shows up to awaken something new? Because in the discomfort of almost not knowing what we asked you to do, you had a beautiful meditation on how grief awakens a notion of what Joe Biden might be able to do for this country, the president-elect. I think that silence, that discomfort, that friction although sometimes doesn't always feel comfortable and doesn't allow for that to happen, can awaken something brand new. We'll take like one more verbal, if someone wants to be one more verbal, and then we'll talk about two other steps. And we see the chat, it's going up. We really appreciate it. But if there are two more points that want to be, one more point that wants to be verbalized, we'll talk about, Alex and I will take it to the next level.
Yeah, I had trouble with this quotation. You know, something that came up for me when I read it is that I think the framing of grief and trauma as character building can often actually be really problematic. And I think this quote made me think a lot about the flip side of what it articulated, right? Which is that, you know, certainly a broken heart can cover more ground if it's a broken heart that has done the work of healing and dealing with its own trauma, right? But I think, you know, but I think that that the opposite can often be true in ways that can be really toxic and damaging, right? Because we know that there are a lot of like damaged, hurting people out there who haven't dealt with their own stuff, and hurt people. And so, yeah, so I really struggled with this quote, and I found myself reacting to it really negatively.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I Alex, please go.
No, I was just gonna say, I'm so glad you're the one who spoke in this moment, because I think it's like the perfect articulation that we are on a full spectrum, folks, of relationship to the work. And it takes all of these feelings in response. And it's also how we build meaning. Right? So taking a statement and one person articulating their feelings and the next, now we are meaning making. And this is part of how you start to build community, because we enter a room, we don't share the same vocabulary, we don't share the same power dynamics, we don't share the same philosophies, but maybe we can start to meaning make together. Right? Scaffolding that.
And let's also talk about the simple fact that we are also not in the same space, right? I can't go to Alex. The way in which that Alex and I can communicate to help to facilitate community building in this very large room that is totally digital is completely unnatural. And so then where does the comfort of the natural come into play when we need to build community? I would say in the sensitivity of our intimacy, and the softness of our ability to be able to let people in instead of calling people out per se. How do we then awaken that space that allows for this to be meaningful for all of us? And that means that we have to sometimes be willing to be a little bit messy. And that messiness is human. We are meant to have complicated space. And so I totally appreciate your reflection on what was shared, because what you shared is that there isn't a universal broad stroke notion to understanding one single thing. That broad stroke, if we adopt only that notion as our way of being, we sometimes rob the nuance of us being human. So it's not, that quote is supposed to spark discourse, not to solve, not be solution bearing. And I think that when we think about community, you can think about the space, again, I'm just gonna keep on referring back to how this can work as building community. If we think about community, we think about how do I create discourse, not necessarily discord, but discourse that can allow for the heart of who I am, the fullness, meaning that I might not be in concert with you, but doesn't mean I can't be in community with you, or I can't be in conversation with you. How do I allow for those two ideas to be present and to be real? So I think I'll talk about intimacy, and then maybe you can talk about our diversifying community, and then we'll go into the questions. Alex, I feel good to you. So when we were thinking about, it tags into what I was saying just a little bit a little bit earlier, intimacy. When we think about COVID-19 and we think, I'm gonna keep on bringing back COVID-19 and what we're living in currently right now, because currently right now I'm having to be intimate with my community in vastly different ways than I ever would have thought of. And those vastly different ways of me interacting with my community is creating a space of intimacy, which is creating a space of dissonance and creating a space for me to have to figure out how to balance the two. How do I navigate those two warring ideas in my body and in my mind? And so when I think about intimacy right now, you, me, everyone, we can create intimacy. Intimacy now is for me, what I've been able to meditate on because of COVID-19 is an energetical exchange that can then happen between a digital conversation. It's a digital exchange, energy. So it makes me think, how can I bring the warmth of who I am, the warmth of who I be, the warmth of where I am into the warmth of who you be, the warmth of where you are? How do I allow for this digital code of my screen, of my essence, of my being, transmit and transmute to you, and then vice versa, you transmitting and transmuting that energy back to me so that I'm as fed as much as you're fed. I am being allowed to let my light come into the center of the conversation as much as you're able to let your light come into the center of the conversation. Not to say those lights have to be the same, but those lights have to be present so that community can show up. And that is necessary. So intimacy, we just want to bring in as we go into the next phase of this conversation, which will be larger peer-to-peer rooms, not the small intimate ones, but larger ones. And you get to choose this time. So it's not, choice is also a part of community building as also random selection. So we are randomly selected into some communities. We get to choose sometimes who we want to be in community with. So we're gonna play with both of those things throughout the session. And hopefully, again, we're just trying to name some of the dynamics that we're putting into play because these are tools for your toolkit. Intimacy, and now I'm gonna pass it on to Alex to talk about community.
Thank you, Jonathan. So you talk about intimacy and I start thinking about vulnerability. I start thinking about some of the fear we have around sharing or opening because we don't know how to close back up, but that is also where community comes in. Today I was taking a shower and I was thinking, how can I expand myself? How can I offer myself and say I have an infinite capacity, both for forgiveness, for renewal, for reimagining how I think about things. And as we're talking about love, as we're talking about expansion, as we're talking about community building, I want us to also embrace, we already talked about discomfort, but embrace tension as something not in opposition to love, but something that requires love to work through, right? So when we start getting woo-woo and we start talking about these practices, right, that feel foreign maybe for some of us who are really coded in a business, in a performative perfectionism, right, that we know is seated in white supremacy characteristics, right? How do we move out of that and give ourselves the permission to imagine a new way of being with others? So that's one thing we're going to ask you to do. The second thing, if you will allow me a small story, okay? So I do device theater. I start with the nothing and build into something. And what I've learned along this journey is so many of us in our theaters think about community as these people living in a particular space that we are quote unquote serving with our quote unquote transformational or quote unquote inspirational work, right? As we go into these breakout rooms, what are other ways we can think about community? For me, something that was incredibly transformative in my process at Teatro Luna was recognizing here we are with our social justice mission, talking about how we're doing good in the world and how are we treating our own artists? How are we treating our own staff? How are we treating those other versions? How are we treating ourselves? And so I want us to really think about that. We can't just be doing good out in the world and not be doing good in this internal space. So as you think about community, there's the community of families, of friend structures, of our national field, and of communities in space. But what other forms of community are you engaging in? How are you serving them? And how are you even naming them? So COVID hit, I had already thought about like, oh, wow, I have this artist and staff community and I'm not serving them in the way that I should. And then COVID hit and we needed to take it to another level. So leadership meetings became times for us to meditate, to breathe, to learn, because we had to be in service to our artists in a different way. So perhaps that is just some thinking for you to do around how you are identifying who and what you serve. If that's helpful, take it. If it is not, leave it. All right, Jonathan, you want to talk about the rooms we've built?
So we built 5 rooms for you. Thank you very much for being present. You actually generated them. So 5 rooms are created from your brilliance. So one of those rooms is, what does community mean in general? We just had a conversation asking what community is. Just wondering, what does community mean? That's one room. And we'll take some time to talk about that. The next room is, what do you need from your community? What needs do you need from your community? Community being a broad word, but what needs do you need from your community? The third room will be, what needs to be healed in your community? What are things that need to be healed in your community? The second to last question is, what does it mean to engage your community? So thinking about ways of engagement strategy, what does it mean to engage your community? And lastly, what does it mean to build intimacy within your community? What does it mean to build intimacy within your community? So the breakout rooms will open up probably right now. And then once they open up, you have the opportunity to choose which room you want to be in. We do ask that someone in the room be considered as the kind of facilitator of the room. Again, self-selection. Someone who wants to be, we invite the youngest person or person who deems to be the youngest in the room to claim the space of leading the flock in this conversation. And then we're going to come back, share a few, and then we're going to close out for the evening. So without further ado, breakout rooms are open, and please have at it.
Thanks, y'all.
Hey everybody, welcome back. I know that some people just got in their room like 10 minutes ago. I know other people have been in their rooms for a while. And we are really, really happy to have you back in a larger conversation with all of us. We're gonna take some time and just a moment. So if you need some water, if you need a stretch, if you need to like yawn, please do. And just allowing for the rest of our beautiful colleagues, the rest of our community for this evening to come together and for us to go into the third part of this evening. It's been a long day. I mean, I don't know how y'all do Zooms, but this is like my 12th and I don't appreciate it. So, but we'll get right on track. So let's give some time, some space for everyone to get some water, do what you need to do. And when everyone comes back, we will take it to the next level. Thank you so much for joining us and staying with us. This is not always the easiest route, but it can be a divine route if we so choose it to be. We have the opportunity to bring some divine energy into space. It's a choice. It's a choice every single day that we have breath. And I know I keep on talking and I will stop.
No, let that deliciousness keep dripping over me, okay? I want to ask you, if you're here, if you're not taking your break, think about how you can continue to open that heart space and send that energy past that computer screen to each other, all right? I was checking out that Padlet, and so many people were saying they found community they didn't know they needed in this moment. So thank you for that. Thank you.
And Josh, when you, we'll let you give us the green light when you feel like everyone is here, and then we'll go to the next level.
All right, if folks just want to turn their video on when they're back, I will peruse.
So I think there's some things that showed up even when we tried to do the breakout rooms that Alex and I were just like, we should presence that when we all come back together, because we want to just name some things that have happened as we were in the midst of trying to build community to bring all of us to have a space of smaller community, larger community, X, Y, and Z. Tools for the hopper when you're thinking about building community. One was that there is a desire and a need that one has to acknowledge that you have to build community from a space of a turtle space, right? Supremacy, capitalistic culture teaches us that we have to be popcorn style. You got to put me in the microwave and it pops and it makes it happen. everyone's supposed to be in the room right away, so they all can be right for their communication. It's supposed to be smooth. And when building community, it is not. It takes time, it takes duration, it takes patience, it takes grace. And I just want to acknowledge and say thank you to everyone who had to wait to be put into your rooms, because you helped to exemplify the necessity that many of us have to bottle up when we start talking about doing things that are foreign to us and doing things that are not always done perfectly, whatever that might mean. And I also just want to name, we also wanted to name this notion of what really happens inside of when we engage with community and think about intimacy. And while I'm talking, please think about things you want to share from your breakout, from your peer-to-peer sharing. We're trying not to use breakout session, but your peer-to-peer sharing, things that you shared, things that you want to lift up in a larger group, things that you want to have present so that we can build together collectively. But the other element that we wanted to uplift inside of and model through the sessions of doing this. I'm reading all of the comments. It's bringing me some joy. But that we want to talk about that happened and say thank you to everyone is compassion. Compassion is a tool that we sometimes don't always talk about so easily and so readily, but is a tool that is deeply needed when thinking about building community. And so without further ado, Alex, you want to uplift any other tools that you saw happening that you want to say that, like, why don't we put that in the
hot? Just one is like, how are you checking back in with your body? Because your body is going to tell you when you are leaning into one of those characteristics that is outside of the range of compassion. And maybe listening to how that's showing up can also help lead you back down the path of generosity. I know that's a tool that I use often, is really checking back in the way we take breath, which I know Jonathan is going to share with us later. The breath is also incremental. Right? We have to take it through the different phases of our body. So I just wanted to remind us of that.
And in this talking about breath, and then definitely I'm gonna be quiet, but in talking about breath, is that breath is the first is our first therapist, right? Breath is our first therapist. It lets us know what's happening inside the body. How you breathe, when you breathe, how you exhale, when you exhale, lets you know the demarcation of what's happening inside yourself. And actually, if you can register with the linguistics of your brain, you can actually have a conversation with your emotional self, your spiritual self, and your physical self. And allowing and your mental self to allow yourself to be present to the conversation. So in thinking about breath and thinking about how you're breathing right now and how you will continue to breathe throughout the time that we have with each other, and even after you say it, leave and in the Zoom, a gift that you can have when trying to build community and build intimacy is, how am I connected? What is happening inside my breath conversation? But without further ado, are there any things that anyone wants to uplift from the breakouts, from the peer-to-peer sharing that happened that you want to share with the rest of the room?
So just with my group, we talked about how with theater communities, it can be different communities based on where you are, based on age, race, and gender. And so we talked about how theater communities should engage in mutually beneficial relationships, and relationships that can be long lasting and not just vampiric, and not just based on the fact that you need an artist of color for representation purposes or grant purposes, and how we do want to the relationship to be long lasting. And we also talked about ways to foster those relationships. And I'm glad we had those conversations.
Yeah, durational relationship, not momentary relationship. So powerful.
Some more voices. Feel free to also utilize the chat if you would like. I am seeing something come up on the Padlet, a new one. Some healing around money and resources is necessary. How much is enough? The process is necessary to support redistribution.
And I just want to remind everyone, we're not afraid of silence. Silence is an active tool. Silence is actually conversation. Silence is the beginning of allowing for interruption to happen. Silence is allowing for someone to potentially be courageous in a moment that they would not speak. And the more and more we extend the elasticity of silence, potentially, the more and more we allow for a voice to be heard that sometimes would not allow themselves to be heard. They allow for that small intuitive voice, that voice that has been guiding them, to bubble up to the surface to let sound come out. And I know that there's another step that has to be made, which is you have to press unmute. But if you allow your voice to ring true in this space, I promise you, there's a profound gift coming out of you that we then feel free to be building from and to build community with. Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Hi.
I love it. Two people at once. Go ahead. I mean, whoever wants to go first, but it's powerful. It's a powerful choice.
I'm happy to defer. If you want to go first, that's fine. It doesn't matter. I was just actually going to say, you know, when I think about the exchange, it's great. There's been like this kind of listing of ideas, but one of the things that I feel like we would really value, be really valuable to us, is actually to be pragmatic in the challenges of this work, and to be able to have really rigorous conversation with each other and push against the ideas of the things that keep us from being able to move forward. There seems to be a lot of collective energy around the idea of deep engagement, of meaningful partnership, but not a lot of discussion about the barriers to that. Or how to move through them. And I do think that some rigor around those questions and just being honest about those barriers would be really a powerful way for us to move forward, that the Brain Trust can help solve those issues. So it's not just a collection of ideas, but a sense of practical application.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for that. Thank you, appreciate that. And the baby, oh my goodness. Stop playing with me on time here, that baby. Stop. All right, yes.
Very, very cute. If I would.
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, in our community discussion or breakthrough session, we did talk about a number of things, including trying to create more of a mutual, reciprocal, joint, mutual benefit approach instead of a we-they approach, or we know better and we're going to tell you, or we're going to serve you, or you're going to wait for it, or whatever. I think just trying to build a co-equal relationship with our communities so that they are invested in what we do and we are knowledgeable when we are putting forth the wonderful things that we end up doing through our art would be helpful. The other thing is, in terms of just the individual needs in this area, I came up with this construct, so you may hate it, but I just thought I'd try it. So notice before you judge, listen before you talk, ask before you criticize, think before you try to fix, and smile before you leave.
Can you place that potentially in the chat, or did you place that on the board, just so that, because it's a powerful sharing, and I think it builds so beautifully and eloquently to what Hannah was sharing just before. So like there's this beautiful synapses that are already starting to connect, which means that we are creating an intimate space. We're listening to each other, which is quite powerful.
I hit the wrong thing. Hang on a second. All right, I'll start over again. I did this.
Thank you.
I'll try. Okay.
Because the ideas that you're bringing up help us to navigate the spaces of our barriers, which Hannah brought up so clearly. And those barriers that we have are real. Those barriers are somewhat systemic, and those barriers are stuff that we potentially might have been taught. And are we willing to sometimes work against those things that we are taught, or name those things that we are taught, so that we can allow for some newness to show up in our lives?
Jonathan?
Yes.
Just from our group, was what do we need from community? Kate brought up a very good question, and that was, what are we identifying as community? Because we operate in many, many different communities. But as we talk about our theater community, even within the theater community, there are many, many different communities we are trying to serve. And we are not serving all of them as individuals. We usually pick one or two communities that we want to be involved in. So we did, in our group, define what community is, or how we are using that word. And then it was brought up, and that unless we heal the division and barriers between communities, we can't even start this conversation. So that's why we thought, or I did, that it's important for us to have affinity groups, affinity breakouts, where I know it sounds separatism, but sometimes we're not speaking the same language, and we need to be in safe spaces where we can feel safe to speak in the way we speak, in the ideas we have, and then find ways to come together if communities want to bridge that. But until we learn how to speak in our language and be authentic, how do you heal the barriers? So for me, community healing has to happen first, or we're just out there acting on ideas that we think are good, but they really don't resonate with us authentically.
Ashe. So I just want to uplift this idea of internal healing that has to happen, and that potentially that internal healing has to start with self first, right? What does healing of self look like? I think that when we talk about this industry that we all are a part of, there's many ways in which we hurt each other, we hurt ourselves, we live lives that don't allow for us to eat properly, sleep properly, be with family, connect with family properly. All those things that actually we don't live in a space of joy. We don't center joy in our practice. So then if we're trying to talk about building community, if we are not having a conversation with joy, if we're not having a conversation with healing, if we're not having a conversation with how are we taking care of feeding each other, feeding our spirit, feeding X, Y, and Z, how can then we act like our programming, our discourse, our anything is going to be feeding or build community for anyone else? And so there are so many steps when we talk about that internal healing that you talked about, which I think is so crucial and important. That first internal healing has to be with what will be with the reflection of the community of yourself, like the mirror reflection of who you are. You're not willing to have that reflection be something that is powerfully centering your own healing zeitgeist. Then what, if you are the sun, I always say this, if you are the sun, and you are not allowing that sun energy to generate a universe that is reflective of the values you profess, then what are you creating? Because we all have the possibility of creating multiple universes within ourselves. Connecting, attracting, bringing, repelling. And how we do that is deeply important.
Gwendolyn Brooks says, what am I going to do with all of this life? And I keep coming back to this statement and this question, especially in this moment. And this path of healing, we talk about it a lot, but we don't often talk about how cyclical it is and how it is a continued, right? So in affinity spaces, individually, we're going to heal and we're going to harm and we're going to be harmed, or we're going to do it all over again. And how do we keep showing up with that in mind? Maybe time for one more before you close.
Yeah, one more before we close out. Yes.
Hi, Jonathan. It's Kelvin.
Hey, Kelvin.
Good to see you. Thanks to you and Alexandra for hosting. I'll just share from our group, which was about what does community mean? And I think it really ties in beautifully to what was just offered, because what is consistent is that there has to be a start with community, and there has to be an acknowledgement. So some of the things our group members offered is that to claim community indicates some reciprocal responsibility. Community is about the authenticity of the invitation. Community is about sharing information. Sharing food was offered. Community is mutual care and investment. And we talked about how, showing up at the conference back in the in-person times, that assumption of community or that expectation, and how that can be illuminating to have those shared affinities in a moment and a knowing of stepping into a community and feeling that feeling, but again, ties back to the invitation and the investment for an individual. So just want to thank my group for offering that. And we had a really great discussion around how we build.
Alex, do you want to say anything in reflection of that before? Because I appreciate that. Thank you so much for that. Hey, I just want to name that. But Alex, do you want to say anything before we wrap up?
Just real quick is that, the theory of social change asks us to look at what we do have, sometimes before what we don't have. And there's some models that have just been so moving to me in Minneapolis, the sharing of the re-granting out when grants were given to others who were in need in this moment, right? That this model that has come across, like, I want us to also remember we're not all starting from zero. We have models to be inspired by, to reimagine and to put forth. And that's just so exciting to me. Yeah.
Ashe. So we want to thank, TCG wants to thank, Alex and I want to thank everyone for sticking through the conversation. You could have been anywhere, actually. You could have been almost anywhere in the world. You could have been, your virtual background can take you anywhere you want to go. You decided to be here. You decided to have this conversation. You decided to stick with us, regardless of all the different things pulling at us, and regardless of all the different ways the world is pulling at us. I want to thank everyone, even the ones who are not able to be present with us right now. Anyone who decided to be in this room for a second, I want to energetically say thank you to them and say thank you for showing up. It means a lot, and it means that there is an investment by this community that is the leaders of the American theater, to deepen their practice and ask the question. We weren't here to solve it. We weren't here to solve all the questions. We were here to spark an idea of what does it mean to have inquiry, and then who's the flock that you hopefully might be able to DM in another room. You might be able to email in another space. It's a durational conversation, again, that has to continue to happen. And then lastly, what we're going to do is that we're going to take a breath together. Something just to kind of close out this evening and allow for this evening to rest, this whole day of conferencing and this whole day called life to settle in our bodies. And what we're going to do is we're going to do something that I do at MBT called a unifying breath, allowing for us to breathe in together just for where we are, from where we stand and where we be, and navigate from that space to enjoy the rest of our day. So if everyone can put their 2 feet or however you can, connected to Mother Earth, connected to the ground in which you stand, the sacred ground in which you stand, the holy ground in which you stand, and allow that energy from Mother Earth, from the core of Mother Earth, to travel up through your legs. Allow the energy from the crown, the royal, the abundant you, to travel through the crown of your head and land into the center of your system. We're just gonna take a breath together. I'm gonna give you a little bit around my technology around breath, what I know so far, so that we're all on the same page. Breath is a very important thing. Breath is the thing that allows for this instrument, this vessel, this gift, this machine to operate. Breath is the thing that woke you up this morning. So with that, we're gonna take a unifying breath, knowing that the space and time which we'll be able to occupy with each other will never happen again. These sacred squares, this Zoom room, this room that you're in right now will never happen, never be the same. So with that, we're gonna honor the space that has held us, this technology that has guided us, and these voices that we have heard by receiving a unifying breath. When we breathe in, I hope that we breathe in love, possibility, joy, affirmation, and we allow for that to root and bake into our system. And then we exhale. We actually consider the exhale as a gift. So it wraps around everyone that we meet, everyone that we know, so that we can flock as a community, as lighter, brighter, abundant human beings, able to do the work we were called on this planet to do. So the count of 3, inhale in, exhale out, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday. May the rest of this conference be a guiding light and force to feed you in ways you need and allow for you to build the kind of relationships that are durational and not momentary. On the count of 3, inhale in, exhale out, and thank you so much for joining us. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, inhale, then exhale. Ashe, thank you.